Ultimate is such a fascinating game at this point in its life. It feels like there's characters from all across the roster and tier list finding new heights every day. And with that level of play across the bar, you need to know all 90 matchups to be at the top level at this point. We're past the days of Melee where you can learn mostly a handful of matchups and coast on the rest. Well, Melee is also beyond that point now, but you know what I mean. Learning all those matchups with one main is typically the go-to. It makes sense. If you play one character, they're gonna be your best for every situation, and you can most often just simply outplay your opponent in a tricky or even bad matchup. However, that's not how most competitors in modern Ultimate go. It's common to see people co-main or secondary a character for bad matchups. Hell, it's not even rare to see top players swapping between 3 different characters at this point, something that used to be nearly unheard of outside of a select few examples. But this approach also makes sense. You see, with Ultimate having this many characters, it also allows for some very lopsided matchups.
Jumping, waiting for Wii Fit Trainer. And right now, there we go. Well, that's
And so the idea becomes, instead of trudging through a bad or annoying matchup, why not just learn a second character that helps you avoid said lopsided matchups? I mean, with how easy people say this game's top tiers are, surely you can hop in an arena with friends for an hour or so and figure them out, right? Now, it turns out that's not the case. I want to go over a few examples of counterpicking in modern Ultimate and just show some examples I like and don't like. And first up is what is, in my opinion, the most impactful counterpick in modern Smash Ultimate. While its impact might have faltered a little bit in the past year, it still had a ton of players inspired to try out a relatively underutilized character in Smash Ultimate at that point. This first example concerns none other than MKLeo. If you've kept up with Smash Ultimate at all, you know his deal. He's the GOAT. He's the one who, until recently, was always #1. He's always out here winning shit and no one could stop him.
People really thought I wasn't the best, you know?
That's crazy.
I had to win.
That's crazy.
Leo was known to dabble in a variety of sword characters. He started out with Lucina and Ike, swapped to Joker, tried out Marth, swapped to Byleth, co-mained Aegis, swapped them out for Corrin at one point, and then tried R.O.B. But the Corrin was always something kinda mystical. He brought it out as a sort of replacement for Aegis first off, and it actually did do quite well. It had wins on Spargo, Raflo, Gluttony, and Meister, which were all great wins for the time and have aged pretty well. But more notable than any of those wins, it won a set versus Sonics. Now, to be fair, this was well before the times where Sonics was fighting for #1 in the world, but even at that time, he was getting pretty good wins, even beating Jackal and Gact at the same event. But when I mentioned Sonics vs MKLeo's Corrin, that's not the set that comes to mind anymore. No. The set that comes to mind was at Wave Dash 2023, an Ultimate Major where MKLeo and Sonics were the top 2 players. With Sonics predicted to win the whole event, and Leo was set to expand on his new Meta Knight because he has an addiction to picking up new sorties. So the set starts and oh shit, the Meta Knight got washed. It was a clean 2-stock to take game 1, and it didn't exactly look competitive. So Leo brought back out the Corrin, which we really hadn't seen since summer of 2022 at that point. It was spring of the next year, and Leo had already beaten Sonics with Aegis this year at Genesis. But it seems like the Corrin was just ready to go, taking winners finals 3-1, and then taking the grand finals reset in another 3-1 to win the tournament. This specific set, alongside Corrin mains like Shattuck and Neo popping up, really put a lot of people onto Corrin. Notably Spargo, being another sortie master, tried out Corrin in attempts to use her in the Sonic matchup, which worked sometimes. And with it sometimes working, a lot of mid to high level players started working on a secondary Corrin. And on paper it makes sense, right? Corrin does decent into the Smash Ultimate boogeymen, Steve, Sonic, and Game & Watch, and was gaining a reputation for being an easy character. So everyone started to pick them up. And when everyone started to pick them up, it stopped working. In my opinion, I believe counterpicking gets less and less effective the more players go for the same one. It reaches a point where whatever Sonic you're fighting with Corrin is going to have 10 times more Corrin experience than you have Sonic experience. And that's also to mention that Corrin just kind of stopped working versus Sonic. The last time Sonics lost to a Corrin was Shattuck at the original Luminosity Invitational, and that tournament barely even fucking counts because he also beat them twice there, showing that the matchup was a lot more even than actually winning. Alongside that, MKLeo tried going Corrin again versus Sonics at Gommel, then lost and went back to Aegis and R.O.B for the Sonic matchup. Now the only people really carrying the secondary Corrin for meta matchups train are lower level players who could definitely learn a lot by just going their main more. I'm also a bit of a hipster when it comes to the secondary Corrins because I was working on one before I ever realized this was a trend. When Ultimate's first competitive matchmaking site came out, Corrin was my most played character, but seeing everyone else go them kinda just made me feel like it was oversaturating the character. And I know this is a little bit of a tangent. At my first ever major, Collision 2024, I heard HBox tell MKLeo that you inspired a whole new generation of Corrins. That was just a fun little story I wanted to tell. Luckily, this story has a happy ending. While Leo hasn't exactly fought Sonics in a while, the last time he did was pretty close with Joker, and Spargo actually dropped Corrin for Roy in the matchup at Supernova this year, in which that was probably my favorite example of counterpicking in recent memory. So Sonics and Spargo play a lot. Not only do they have over 90 sets against each other, they also are practice partners, which gives Sonics a lot of info on how Spargo plays the game, and gives Spargo good info on what sorties to try next when his current one stops working. This Roy pick in Grand Finals was the first time Spargo had ever played Roy in tournament, and it caught pretty much everyone off guard. I myself was watching the set on call with some friends, and when I heard Roy, I had to double check I didn't have another set on in the background. And not only did this make this set a fun one to watch because of the surprise factor, but from what we can tell right now, the Roy just kind of works. It took Supernova over Sonics Game 5 and also beat him at the Luminosity Invitational 2, which was an actual tournament. Of course, people pointed out that Spargo had been practicing this pick in VODs of his sessions with Sonics, but not a ton of people actually watch those VODs. Another recent secondary I've also loved thinking about is actually from Akola. You see, Akola is number 1 at this point, right? He's the best guy from the best region with the best character, but he always had a head-to-head that was rough in Spargo. The recent times they ran into each other, it really wasn't pretty for Akola, and so they started practicing a secondary Aegis for the matchup. Akola had experimented with other characters before, notably Kazuya, but the Aegis seemed to be the one they just have the most fun with. While it was intended to be his answer for Spargo, with Aegis being Cloud's worst matchup, Akola's managed to get a lot of really good wins with the characters before it was ever used effectively versus Spargo. He used it versus Doramigi, Ashimo, and Tamabi Daifuku before finally using it to get a win versus Spargo at Kagaribi. And that's not even to mention that against Doramigi, Min Min is considered Aegis's worst matchup. It's a solidified secondary now, with a lot of use cases when Akola just doesn't feel like Steve is the right answer. Since then, he's used it against Carmelo, Rocky, Omuatsu, and Mia, with it doing fairly well against all of them. I get that these can just sound like names at a point, but these are all pretty good players over in Japan. Carmelo has a win on Gluttony, Rocky has top 8 at a major, Omuatsu is just generally very good, and Mia is Mia. It's not a super common secondary anymore, and it's also not a hyper-specific one. I feel like a lot of people, myself included, have tried to find secondaries that beat specific matchups, when that's not the way it should really work. The way Akola has done it seems more like, hey, I have fun learning this character, they helped me versus one big struggle I have, and it looks like they have a lot of other use cases with them. And as such, it's been a super useful pick to just have in the back pocket for them. The Japanese counterpick meta looks a lot different than what we in the West already have. Looking at number 2 in Japan, and in the world for that matter, is Mia, the Game & Watch main, who also wins pretty much as much as Akola with some small underperformances here and there. He also secondary Steve and what the fuck? Yeah, so Mia's worked on a secondary Mii sword fighter, which isn't exactly a common character, or a very good one, being the 7th worst character in Smash Ultimate according to the official tier list. And while at a lot of overseas majors, it doesn't exactly have amazing results, in Mia's home region, it's racked up some really impressive wins. In the aforementioned Carmelo, Raru, EZS, and Yara. This feels like another example of, hey, I find this character fun, let me find a use for them. And the Raru win it has under its belt is a sign that it's not exactly a meme pick, it's got genuine utility despite being such an underwhelming character. There's a few funny examples I want to throw in here real quick. Stuff like DD's Pac-Man, which took a Game 5 set over Sonics. DD is already a Steve and Pokemon trainer co-main, who also has now dropped Pac-Man. There's also Tweaks, Wario, and Sephiroth, 2 counterpicks who show up every now and then and attempt to cover some of Diddy Kong's struggle matchups. And if you can tell from my voice, yeah, neither of them have really done that job as of late, which is unfortunate for the many Tweak fans out there. Which doesn't include me. You've also got the duo of Shiny Mark and Zamba, who, at least for a while, had secondary Lucinas for Game & Watch, with that character being Rob and Pikachu's worst matchup. But both have since dropped the character in order to put more time into their solo main, which seems to be working. Hi, Indigo from the future here, and by that I mean like a day after this video was edited. Yeah, Zamba relapsed. At the end of the day, I don't think counterpicking is an inherently good or bad thing. As much as I myself love counterpick meta, I think it comes down to the intentions of it. Are you playing the character because you enjoy them, or are you playing them because they're the right choice? There's a handful of matchups that I've stuck it out with Cloud and found to be really fun and rewarding, even though they're considered not great matchups for him. Characters like Inkling, R.O.B, and Sonic are some of my favorite to play against with Cloud, even if I have a better option right there next to me. It feels extra rewarding overcoming a bad matchup, and it's a lot easier to see where my adaptations are coming into play. You shouldn't feel forced into playing any character. I've had friends say it feels like playing Wolf is a 9 to 5, and that's never a fun feeling. So get out there and theorycraft. Do you have a mid-tier who you find fun that low-key might help you in a matchup? Grind it out for a bit. See if your theory is right or not. Worst case scenario is you end up keeping them around for friendlies or a few unintended matchups. And the best case scenario, it reestablishes your love for the game. I personally had that happen pretty recently with Pit. At the end of the day, you control who you play in Ultimate. Have a good night.
Show me your best, like crystal blisters, it's all over now. Psycho can't use a